Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Food Solutions Summit 4.0. I am so thrilled and honored to have Dr. Terry Wahls, who is also my teacher as a Wahls certified practitioner. Dr. Wahls is an Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner, and she conducts clinical trials in the setting of multiple sclerosis. In 2018, she was awarded the Institute for Functional Medicine's Linus Pauling Award for her contributions in research, clinical care, and patient advocacy. She's the author of actually two books that I have here, the Wahls Protocol, and also her awesome cookbook, which you can learn a lot more about how to apply her approach. And I'm so happy to have you here, Dr. Wahls. Thank you for being a returning champion to this summit. I really appreciate it. So you have an amazing story, and I've heard it before, but we want to just hear your story and celebrate your story. And then I have some questions for you about mitochondria and just some of the things about your protocol that make it so effective.
Sure. So I'm an internal medicine physician, and I go to medical school, complete my residency, in practice. Things are going great. I have a couple of young children. And then I develop weakness in my left leg. I see my neurologist who does the exam and says, Terry, this could be bad or really, really bad, and then begins ordering the workup. And so for the next 3 weeks, as I'm going through these tests, I think about the fact that in the previous 20 years, I've had this gradually worsening bouts of severe electrical face pain. And so I know that, okay, I clearly have a progressive neurologic disease. I'm hoping for a rapidly fatal diagnosis because I don't want to become disabled. I get my MRI of the brain, the spinal cord, a spinal tap, and the diagnosis is relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. And that episode of visual dimming that I had 13 years earlier was probably optic neuritis and my new leg weakness. I have criteria for MS. 2 lesions separated by time and space. And so that's in 2000. I find the best MS center in the country. I see their best neurologist. I take the newest drugs. I'm 45. I have a 5-year-old daughter, 8-year-old son. Yeah, and then 3 years later, I hear the words tilt, recline, wheelchair, and that I have converted to secondary progressive multiple sclerosis. I take mitochondria in a form of chemotherapy. It does not help. I take Tizabri, the new biologic drug. It does not help. Then I'm switched over to Cellcept. And that's when I decide I'm going back to reading the basic science because I know those mouse studies are usually 5 to 15 years ahead of the human studies. And I'm reading about MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Huntington's disease, ALS. And I decide that it's mitochondrial dysfunction that drives disability. And so I sort out and create a supplement cocktail to support my mitochondria. The speed of my decline slows, and I'm super grateful. And it helps my fatigue a tiny, tiny bit. But, I'm grateful for that tiny bit. Fortunately, my mind is still clear. The university and the VA keep redesigning my job so I can continue to work. One of the things they do is they put me in the institutional review board, so I'm reviewing research trials. And I say, give me all the stuff related to brain. And I'm getting better at reading brain studies. So I have a longer list of supplements. My chief of staff at the VA calls me into his office in July of 2007, says, Terry, I'm assigning you to the traumatic brain injury clinic. You'll start in January. There won't be any residents. You'll just be part of a multidisciplinary team. And I go home, tell Jackie about this new assignment. She says, honey, there's no way you can do that job. And I say, well, yes, I know. And come January, I'll go to that clinic and I can either do the job or I can't. And then I have to finally apply for medical disability. So I'm pretty bummed. 2 weeks later, in my IRB packet is a study using electrical stimulation of muscles in people who are paralyzed. They're never going to walk again. And I read through that. It's really pretty interesting. I do a quick search to see, are there any studies using this in MS? There are not. But I make an appointment with my physical therapist. I tell him I really want to try electrical stimulation of muscles. He says yes. He just uses it for his athletes a lot. He can grow bigger muscles, but he's not sure my brain can talk to those bigger muscles. But he gives me a test session. It hurts like hell. But when it's over, I feel great. He says, Terry, it's the endorphins. And so we add electrical stimulation of muscles to my little tiny workouts that I'm doing. Then I also discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. They have a course on neuroprotection from the functional medicine approach. And so now I go through that course. I have a longer list of supplements, which I'm happy to add. And I'm doing my electrical stim. And then I have this really big aha. And of course, I laugh at myself for how long it took to have this aha. Like, what if I redesigned the paleo diet that I've been following already for 5 years based on this long list of supplements? Like, where are those things in the food supply? So that's a little more research, but I'm into that. And so now I've redesigned my paleo diet into a very structured, these are the foods you got to stress. And I start this new way of eating December 26, 2007. Now, for your listeners, by that point, I'm so weak I cannot sit up anymore. I'm in a zero gravity chair with my knees higher than my nose. That's how I staff the resident clinic. That's how I take my meals at home. I can take just a couple steps using 2 walking sticks. Otherwise, I'm in that short recline wheelchair. I'm beginning to have brain fog, which is probably why my boss told me I was going to have to go to the traumatic brain injury clinic. He's going to try and force me into medical retirement. And my trigeminal neuralgia, those electrical face pains, have been getting progressively more severe. So it's clear to me I'm on track to be bedridden by my illness, because I'm already pretty close to that, demented by my illness because of the brain fog, and dying with intractable pain because it's so hard to get my pain to stop. So I start this new way of eating. January comes, I go to the clinic. The first 2 weeks, I just watch from my tilt recline wheelchair. And then the third week, and you have to start doing the exams. And I come home Monday night, and I tell Jack, honey, could I sit in a regular chair? Which I hadn't done in years. So I have supper with my family in a regular chair. And I don't choke, so that's pretty exciting. And then, I go back to clinic, and by Friday, when I come home, I tell Jack, I think I can do this. And at the end of January, my physical therapist says, Terry, I think you're stronger. Let's have you do your exercises 10 minutes twice a day. And it's 15 minutes twice a day, then 20 minutes twice a day, then 30 minutes twice a day. And then I start walking with 2 walking sticks at the hospital, stunning my colleagues, then with 1 walking stick, and then none. And then on Mother's Day of 2008, like 5 months into this, actually 7 months of electrical stimulation, but 5 months of my new diet, I want to try riding my bike, which I haven't done in 6 years. And so we have to have an emergency family meeting. My kids do not want me to ride my bike, so they don't want me to risk falling. But Jackie says, okay, we'll give it a try. She tells my 6'5", big, tall, strapping son, you run on the left. She tells my 13-year-old daughter, who is pretty good sized herself, she's, you'll run alongside in the right, and she'll follow. We all get in a position, and I get on my bike, and I bike around the block. Now, that 60-year-old boy, he's crying. My 13-year-old girl, she's crying. Jackie's crying. I'm crying. When I relive that moment, the tears still come, because it was at that moment that I understood that the current understanding of progressive multiple sclerosis is incomplete. And who knows how much recovery might be possible. So I kept riding my bike a little bit more every day. And then in October, Jackie came home and said, honey, I signed us up for the Courage Ride. It's 18.5 miles. And however far you go, it's going to be great. And at that point, the furthest I'd gone had been 8 miles. But once again, I crossed the finish line. Once again, my kids are crying, Jackie's crying, I'm crying. And this fundamentally changes how I think about disease and health. It will change the way I practice medicine, and it will change the focus of the research that I do. And I've since made it my mission to teach clinicians how to use these concepts in their clinical practice. And I teach thousands of clinicians each year, and to teach the public how to use these concepts to reverse their disabilities, to restore energy, vitality. If for the listeners, you should all go check out my Instagram page,
Yes.
Dr. Terry Wahls, because I have pinned at the top this amazing video that a mom sent to me of her little boy who has something called Mitchell syndrome, where the brain, they can't make myelin appropriately. And so the little infant began regressing on his milestones. And the workup, they said he's got a leukodystrophy, fancy word for the brain no longer making myelin. And someone had sent her a copy of my book with a note saying, read this book, it'll change your life. And so she read the book and said, wow, I got to fix all this stuff for my mitochondria. And she looked at her son's formula, and if it was missing the things that I said the brain needed, she got it in supplement form and added it to the formula. And that little boy started hitting his milestones again. And so they repeated the MRI. Little boy's brain was now myelinating appropriately. He was hitting his milestones. He's picking up his head. He's crawling. He's walking. He's climbing. And so the mom's message was, there's so much that can be done. If your physician says there's nothing more to do, check out the Wahls Protocol, because you may be surprised at how much recovery is possible.
Yes. I love that story, and that's awesome. And I do love your Instagram. So if you want to see Terry like in her garden and doing a snow bath after her sauna and riding her bike, it's always so inspiring. And I hope someday maybe you and I can go for a ride. I'm a cyclist too.
Yeah.
And that story is amazing too. And it's funny because when I first started studying nutrition, I remember, reading somewhere was probably like a, pharmaceutical handout. And it was this sort of thing where it was like, some things you just can't change. And it really burst my bubble. And then I had another teacher that said, you can change anything there. You never know. There's always the possibility of change. And thank God I heard that, because then I really kept pursuing it. And that's, our body is constantly changing. And of course, our food is, what our body, the building blocks of everything that we are able to make on a cellular level. And your TED Talk that came out, I think it was it 2011?
2011.
Yeah.
It happened. Yeah.
And that, such an amazing TED Talk, and I can link to that too. But, what you really talked about was minding your mitochondria. And that's definitely like looking at metabolism at a very cellular level. So can you want to just talk a little bit about, why they're so central to our overall health?
So I'll do a quick little evolutionary biology tour here. So a couple billion years ago, the oxygen content rose, killed off, I think, 99% of all life forms at that point. But there were some bacteria that had some mutations that let them utilize the oxygen more effectively to make their metabolism, the particular molecule adenosine triphosphate, we know as ATP. And those ancient bacteria would eventually be engulfed by bigger bacteria, and they developed a cooperative relationship. And so those are our ancient mitochondria. And because those ancient bacteria were more effective, they thrived, and they would evolve into plants, make chloroplast and photosynthesis down one line, and into mitochondria and allow for movement in the animal kingdom. And these ancient mitochondria power all of the activity of all of our cells. Now, the cells that are most energy demanding are our brain, because they have to sense the world, help us move, help us think, help us integrate all of that. So there's the most mitochondria per cell in your brain, your retina, because it's the moving picture of the life that we're seeing, and your heart. And so if you got a brain-related trouble or a mood-related trouble, so psychiatric or neurologic, the health of the mitochondria are what's driving that disease. If you have a vision problem with your retina, it's the health of your mitochondria that are driving that disease. And so for me, early on, I was like, okay, I have to fix my mitochondria. And I really focused on the nutrients, molecule by molecule, that you could test like you would a drug study. So that's how I made this very rich supplement cocktail, which was super helpful. I mean, I felt way more terrible without my supplement cocktail, and I still take a lot of supplements. But the magic happened when I said, I'm going to redesign my diet, probably because as good as science is, we don't really understand the 2 billion chemical reactions that happen every second in my cells, in our cells. So we sort of know some key reactions, but we don't know all of them. So if I design my food to maximize those 40 key nutrients that we've identified for my mitochondria, I'm probably going to get about 10,000 more that are really good for me if I fix my diet. And I'm really, that is when the magic happened. Now, I still feel better when I take my supplements to further boost all this. And part of the reason I think food plus targeted supplements make a lot of sense. Bruce Ames, who was the nutrition biochemist that really drove my thinking as I was zeroing in on mitochondria.
The triage theory.
Yeah, he makes the observation that with targeted high dose nutrients, we can drive some of these chemical reactions that prevent the damage from certain genetic mutations and can reverse the damage from neurologic and severe psychiatric disorders. And so we are using high dose nutrients in some sense as drugs to drive more favorable biochemistry. But you got to fix the diet. You're never going to really fix it with supplements alone. The supplements can certainly accelerate, but you have to fix the diet.
Totally. And yeah, I remember hearing you say once in one of our calls or somewhere that, you know, you took a break from your supplements at one point and to see like, is this really helping me? And then you said it was hard to get out of bed the next couple days later.
That's a funny story. So, you know, being, you know, a conventional doc, early on in my recovery, I had my first handful of mitochondrial supplements. 6 months into it, I thought, phooey, I'm wasting my money. So I stopped. And you know, the next 24 hours was okay, but at 36 hours, man, I just really couldn't get out of bed to go to work. And after 72 hours, Jackie comes in with my supplement tray and says, you know, honey, I think you ought to try these again. So yeah, okay, I did. And the next morning I could get up and go to work. And I was like, okay, I was back to my usual level of energy. So, you know, being a scientist, I thought, okay, well, that's pretty interesting. Let's repeat this in 2 weeks. So I stopped everything. 24 hours, I was okay. At 36 hours, I felt terrible. I couldn't go to work. I waited 72 hours, took the supplements again, and I was back to my usual level of fatigue, and I could go to work. I was so excited. Like, oh my God. I'm figuring stuff out that my neurologist doesn't know, that my primary care doc doesn't know. So that was when I talked to my human subjects office at the IRB and said, give me all of the studies related to the brain. I want them. And so I was reading more and more and getting more comfortable with being the principal investigator of the most important experiment of all, which is my life. And so I had my little lab notebook. I'd have little theories as to what was going on, what I thought was happening, what new supplement I might try. And so I have been tinkering with myself ever since.
And, you told that story about when you were 45, when everything started to kind of really affect you, and you just turned 69.
Well, yeah, here's another super interesting look. There are a bunch of online biological age calculators that are sort of fun to follow. So when I fill out that based on what I could do at age 52 and what I could not do, my weight, my blood pressure, my lipid values, my biologic age at that point was 69 at age 52. So, that was like 14 years older, 17 years older than, chronologic age. So here I am at age 69. So my BMI is now 21. My lipids look great. I can do 12 push-ups. I can jog. I strength train. I can carry 60 pounds for 2 minutes without any problem. I can carry 30 pounds going up and down stairs. And so now my biologic age on that calculator is 56. So, and these are really fun to do. I encourage people to do that. And, I also have done my telomeres, which is another biomarker that when I sent it off, because I know that MS is a disease of accelerated aging, I was bracing myself for a telomere age that was going to be older than my chronologic age. It's like, okay, whatever it is, you just check again in 2 years, see if it's, getting younger. Well, it turns out my telomere age was 14 years younger than my chronologic age. Now, the company wanted me to go on a Mediterranean diet, and so I didn't. I was sort of annoyed with them, like, God, you guys should have been asking me what I was doing,
Right.
since my telomeres were in such good shape.
Yes. Your diet originally started for people with MS, and it's really expanded out to kind of anybody with an autoimmune because it's so specific. So can you just talk a little bit about, just how those work together, autoimmune and metabolic dysfunction?
So because the diet is really designed for mitochondrial health, it's going to be good for people certainly with MS or any kind of neurologic disease, any kind of psychiatric disease. And now that we've recognized that mitochondrial dysfunction also accelerates insulin resistance, prediabetes, and diabetes, it can be very helpful for that as well. And so all of our cells rely on our mitochondria. And we've also discovered that it turns out to be really good for fertility. Because I've had to revise my consents to notify people that when you start a steady diet, your fertility may improve. So if you're not wanting to get pregnant, you got to be sure that you're using contraception. And during the study, we didn't want you to get pregnant. So please, even if you've been told you're infertile, you have to use contraception to be in our studies. So fixing your mitochondria, some of the key concepts, we want you to have sufficient protein, and we have strategies for meat eaters and non-meat eaters. Certainly, my preference is that people eat meat, fish, poultry. But if for ethical reasons, spiritual or just reasons, you choose not to do that, we do have guidance for vegetarians. And then more non-starchy vegetables. We stress green leafy vegetables, spinach, lettuces, bok choy, parsley, cilantro, basil, all sorts of green herbs. Get 3 cups. And then we want to have 3 cups of the cabbage, onion, mushroom family vegetables. We really, great for detox. The mushrooms are really good for increasing the nerve growth factors in the brain. And then deeply colored, these pigments are really polyphenols, which are antioxidants. And those molecules are too big for us to absorb them directly. But the magic is the bacteria in your bowels will digest those polyphenols into metabolites that do get into our bloodstream that have really wonderful impact on our immune cells, on our brain cells, and are very protective for the mitochondria. We went low fat in the 1960s, in part because the oil companies paid scientists to study fat and abandon the sugar hypothesis that sugar in white flour was the big driver for inflammation and heart disease. So huge amounts of money were spent on developing statins to drive down cholesterol, which at the same time increased psychiatric disease, suicides, homicides, violence. It turns out the biggest reservoir of cholesterol is in the brain, and cholesterol is a key component of myelin in the brain, and so the cholesterol hypothesis is a little more controversial. There's much stronger evidence that sugar, white flour, high glycemic index diets drive diabetes, insulin resistance, and that eggs, if you don't have an immune response, particularly the egg yolk, really, really good for you. And that, I could sort of wax eloquent. The studies that red meat are bad for you are sort of cherry-picked, because there are also studies showing that more red meat, there's fewer relapses, less disability progression for MS. The processed meats, hot dogs, they're bad for you. The salamis, they're bad for you. But our ancestors for 250,000 years were eating a wide variety of meats, mammalian meats, fish, reptiles, amphibians. So we have a much longer evolutionary history eating meat. There's a very short history of eating legumes, only about 8 to 10,000 years. And if you want to be a vegetarian or vegan for spiritual reasons, in order to protect your brain, you have to supplement with B12. You probably will benefit from supplementing with omega-3 oils, fish oil, or at least algae-based DHA oil. And if you do that for children, you're putting the child at very significant risk for neurologic and psychiatric problems.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I joke about it sometimes when people ask me about, like, what's the best kind of this? There's so many choices, and it's sometimes I say, well, what about your grandparents or your great grandparents? What did they eat? And it's going back to that ancestral nutrition that we've done for so long. And then we see these changes, like you said, in the 60s and beyond, where it just, it morphed into this huge food industry that was, in for the money and in for the flavor and the addiction. And so as soon as we start going back, and that's what I love too about, just to plug your cookbook too, is it really does give you some great recipes. And, because it can feel overwhelming to change your diet and your lifestyle. And, there's a lot of barriers and mindset barriers that we come up. I could never do that. I don't like that, but it's a journey, and it's meeting people where they're at.
We can talk about, some people are ready for a big wholesale change all at once, usually because there's a crisis that led you to that. But for most of us, when we create a new habit, we start with a small step, get that step down, then we do the next step, get that step down, and do the next step. So I can't run a marathon in 2 months because I decided I wanted to do that. I had to first start walking, then maybe jogging slowly, and then eventually, if I stay with it in a year, or maybe 2 years, I could perhaps run that marathon. Improving your diet, it might be that the first step is, well, instead of having a 6-pack of Coke every day, I'll have 5 and I'll have 1 iced tea. And then next week I'll have 4 and I'll have 2 iced teas. And the week after that, I'll have 3, and I'll have 1 sparkling water and 2 iced teas. And so I begin a process of replacing foods that I know are harmful with foods that are less harmful. Or maybe that's too hard, and what I'm going to focus on instead is I'm going to add things that are really good for me. And Dr. Wahls says that green leafy vegetables are the most important thing to figure out. So I'm going to take your recipe for a green smoothie. And this is a great exercise. We used to do this with our vets. We'd pass around a kale, we'd all eat a bite of it and say, oh my God, that's so bitter, it's terrible. There's no way in hell I could eat that. Then we take that same bunch of kale leaves, chop them up, add green grapes, some olive oil, ice, and water, blend it all together, pass it around, and now it's actually quite tasty because the combination of olive oil, in the green grapes, that gets rid of the bitterness. Then we fry up some bacon to the desired level of doneness, or we use ghee if we have people who don't want to have bacon. Take out the bacon, chop it up, and add the chopped kale into the bacon fat, stir it around until it's wilted, about 60 seconds. Then add the chopped bacon back and pass around little samples of that. And my vets would say, like, oh my God, well, that actually is quite delicious. It's the experience of taking a bitter vegetable into something that's delicious that their children would enjoy and that they would enjoy, makes them realize, actually, I could start eating greens again.
Yes.
And so that is a really powerful food to add, whether it's green smoothies or cooked greens or big green salads. The greener the lettuce leaf, the better for you. Will have a huge impact on your brain and on your eye health, and I'd also say your heart health. So you could focus the additions.
Yes.
And when you are ready, begin replacing the harmful foods with foods that are less troublesome for you. And when you're really ready and you want to, like, I'm going to try the modified paleo diet. We call it the Wahls diet or the Wahls paleo diet. We'll be ready for you. But just begin with the ads. Figure out how to have green smoothies and cooked greens. It could be transformative.
Totally. 100%. And that smoothie sounds delicious. And I have to say, I do a similar one. I sometimes put a date in it versus the grapes. So that grape sounds kind of exciting. And if you put like a half or even a whole lemon in there and blend it up, that it just really is
it gives a lovely brightness to it.
Yeah.
And if you, with your family, pass around that kale, or you could use parsley leaves, that's really a lovely combination. And you pass those around, and raw, I think that's bitter. I couldn't possibly do it. But when you mix it in that smoothie and then you taste like, well, actually, that's really pretty good. Then they're much more interested and excited to try this food.
Totally. I'll just say one quick little story. My daughter, she's 23 now. And when she was little, my husband and I had a restaurant. And I remember going into the back of the kitchen and she was grabbing for a Brussels sprout, like a raw one. And the chef, he's like, if she eats it like that, she's probably never going to like them ever. I'm not giving it to her. And he ended up cooking some up for her. But, it was that same thing. Like, hey, let's make sure this little baby, gets to taste it really deliciously cooked.
Yes. And helping people understand that many vegetables are bitter. The pH is a little bit high. And if you add acid and fat, that lowers the pH, really gets rid of the bitterness. And now this becomes much more enjoyable for us.
Yes. Oh, that's great. Well, I want to just thank you so much, Dr. Wahls, I know you're so busy changing the world and helping people. Really, I mean, we all are. We're all busy in our little, ecosystems. You have a nice big one, so helping a lot of people with autoimmunity. Thank you for being a part of the summit. It means so much to me. And I'm so grateful that our paths crossed and you've been my teacher for a few years. So thank you. And yeah.
carry on, save the world.
Yes.
Let them know that food builds their body and brain. So make the highest quality food that you can, so you have the highest quality body and brain.
Great, great. And we'll link some free gifts from Dr. Wahls and also her Instagram page, which I highly recommend. She does lots of interviews and goes live. She's just doing it all there. All right. Thanks, everybody.